Another thing that exorcists are seeing is in relationship to oppression. So oppression, we've seen a drastic rise in relationship to oppression. Some of it's connected to the pornography issue, but some of it is actually connected to the fact that there's a drastic increase in witchcraft and Satanism that's affecting people. Now, there's 3 tiers of witches and Satanists. There's 3 tiers. They tend not to like to do too much with each other, at least in my experience, although once in a while they'll kind of do stuff together, but they tend to kind of keep their distance from each other. But each one has there's 3 levels. In relationship to the witches, there's just the people who dabble in witchcraft. And those people, by and large, don't get too much influenced by diabolic influence in an extraordinary way. Then there's the middle tier. I call them the hacks. These are the people who are engaged in witchcraft, who are trying to do stuff, they're trying to research it, they're trying to get stuff, become proficient in it because it's a form of empowerment, okay? But these are the hacks. These are the people who you'll see them online. We will cast a spell for $45. Just sign right up and we'll give you, we'll get you that boyfriend through this spell, right? There's actually a ritual called an exorcism for he who has become subject to a spell by a love potion. I actually had to use it once. So then the third tier, and this is true even of the Satanists. So the Satanists, I'm sure you remember that guy that was in Oklahoma City who had stolen the host, or he says he stole a host. And by the way, I thought that the Bishop Coakley's approach to that was a stroke of genius. Just tell him, hey, that's our property. If you don't do this, we're going to sue you for theft. So he gave it back, right? Well, we hope he gave it back. But it was so funny because you can tell the guy's a total hack. He gets up there and he's holding, it's just a piece of bread. Why does everybody make such a fuss, a piece of bread? Whoa, time out. You're the guy that's making the fuss about it. You won't give it up. You're holding on to it. You're telling everybody you're going to do this with it. So really, you're the one that's making the fuss about the thing. But he was a total hack because true Satanists and witches, you don't even know who they are. They can be the person sitting next to you in church. They can be the judge or the policeman or the fire department guy. They can just be anybody that has an upstanding position because Satanists know that if they are caught for their activities, they're capital crimes for what they're doing. And so it's so hidden, you can't even find out who they are. The witches that are at that third level, the highest level, that aren't the hacks, are the same way. You don't even know who they actually are. And most of them, the witchcraft has been in their families for 300 to 400 years, to the point where they actually have the same level of knowledge, some of them, almost, that I do in relationship to how this works, how the demons are, how they function, etc., how to get involved with. Those people that are on that upper tier, the witches, they don't cast spells against people, try and cause harm, because they know that they can actually become subject to it. So they just avoid it. But there's a drastic increase due to the witches and Satanism that's affecting people. We're seeing a drastic increase in the oppression. That layered on top of some natural problems. I mean, the one thing that people say, COVID made people mentally ill. I said, no, people were already mentally ill. COVID just brought it out. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, let's look at it this way. About 15 years ago, I was talking to a group of Catholic psychologists. There was 40 of them. And I said, already by this time, a majority of our culture has already slipped into mental illness. And you have to understand that in psychology, they think something is mentally healthy if everyone is doing it. Well, we as Catholics know that's not true. What's mentally healthy is what the natural law dictates, not what everyone's doing. And I made the observation, I said, look, 50 years ago, or if a guy stood on the street corner and said, I think 2 dudes should get married, they would have hauled that guy off to a rubber room. But now, 56% of the people in this country think it's perfectly fine. That's a sign that we have become completely disconnected from reality. Okay. So that being said, the amount of mental illness is also creating a problem, because then what happens is that it becomes harder to actually do the good, etc. COVID just brought the thing to the surface. That's all it did. Okay. That's the state of the battlefield. It's not good. However, there is a positive sign. Many of the priests that are newly ordained that are coming up right now are some of the most solid, chaste, Orthodox priests that I've come across. They're really, I have a lot of hope for these guys. Their desire, they're self-sacrificial, they're willing to do what it takes. There's a desire for masculinity in their priesthood, etc. They're on the path to becoming real spiritual fathers, etc. And that's a sign from God, because anytime there's a problem, God starts stacking it. He starts stacking the graces as preventatively, so that as the problem reaches its crisis, the things are in place. And I think that a lot of the newly ordained priests are solid, and I think they're going to do a lot of good. There's more exorcists now. When I was first started being an exorcist 15 years ago, there were only 13 exorcists in the entire country, and out of that 13, only 5 really knew what they were doing. Now there's about 130, of which 20 to 25 know what they're doing. So it's better, right? But this is an important point, because exorcists are on the forefront, because a lot of times when you're dealing with cases of possession, the demons do 2 things. One is that by combating them, you're weakening the demons in the process. So it does have an overall effect. It may not be very perceptible, but it does have an overall effect. But the second part of it is they start revealing to you many of the things which I mentioned, that this is what's going on. Then there is a tremendous amount of protection that is being given to people who are faithful. Look at it just on this college campus. Think about it. Okay, it's got people who have their problems, etc. But the amount of protection that is being afforded to people who are being faithful is extraordinary. One time when I had the noonday devil in a case of possession, yeah, he's a real guy. It's interesting because when I researched who he was, he's the demon of the midlife crisis. That's what the fathers say. The fathers of the church. So when psychologists say, hey, we come up with this idea, the midlife crisis. Sorry, fathers beat you to the punch. But they said he was the demon of the midlife crisis. But at one point, he said to me during the exorcism, he just looks at me and he says, if you weren't being protected, I'd snap your neck. It didn't cause any fear. I'm like, hey, he's right, I'm being protected. Right? And over the course of time, I began to realize, as I view the suffering that people who are possessed or people who are being attacked diabolically, the amount of the things that they deal with diabolically in the attacks, that the level of protection that are being given to the faithful in general, that people who are trying to lead a good Catholic life, is extraordinary, because obviously the diabolic influence today is at an all-time high. Right? We're not seeing stuff that's normal. There's also a general awareness that we are in combat. It's slowly coming up, especially among the laity. They're recognizing that they have to do these things in order to keep their families protected. They have to do the stuff that requires to keep demons at bay in their own particular lives, etc. So a lot of the laity are coming up to speed. Some of the priests are, but not so much. I have more hope in the laity recognizing that this is an important thing that's actually coming up. So what I'm saying is that, okay, so the battlefield, the generals look like they're overrunning the thing, but God is now forming the troops. It's coming together, slowly. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. But at a certain point, those people who are faithful, their ability to influence the good is going to be rather extraordinary. And then I'm going to end with this, and then we'll have just a few questions. When we look at how bad everything is in the world and the church, for example, when we see, Our Lady of Fatima said, unless Russia is consecrated to my Immaculate Heart, Russia will spread its errors. And many countries or many states, there'll be ruin of many states, right? So many of the countries are going to be destroyed. Okay. You also see this in relationship to the various apparitions of Our Lady throughout time. Interesting is at Akita, Japan, when Our Lady appeared there, she predicted that there would be cardinal against cardinal and bishop against bishop, and you see that. We were seeing that already, where there's this infighting that's starting to go on among the hierarchy. And so that was a prediction. And at there she said, well, it's too late. The chastisement's coming. There's nothing you can do except to pray for the spared the effects of it. But that tells you can pray and be spared the effects of it. The overrun of the battlefield by the diabolic is the spiritual precursor to the stuff that's coming. But the thing to keep in mind is that everything Our Lady has predicted in these apparitions has come true. And that also means that what will come true is the fact that eventually her Immaculate Heart, the Pope, will consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart, and as a result, the Immaculate Heart will triumph. We know that the church will resurrect, almost because we know it's going to get to the point where it almost looks like the thing's extinguished, and then it's going to resurrect and have a new vitality and a new life. So that's coming. So even though we see this, the overrun of the diabolic and the fact that the battlefield is so brutal, we know that the light's at the end of the tunnel. Our job is just to be very persistent, very consistent, making sure that we're being very faithful to God, to the teachings of the church, not allowing ourselves to fall into sin, always maintaining a habitual life of grace. And then as a result of that, we'll get through it. And that in the end, all of us here, I think, will eventually see the glory of the church restored. And then the demons, the battlefield complexion will completely change. Because once Our Lady gets involved, the demons are nowhere to be found. She has perfect coercive power over demons, and every time she just shows up, they're out of there. So we know that that's coming. Okay. Any questions?